And there we go, we're live. Hello, you are listening to the novel Tea Book Nook with all of our technical difficulties today. Thank you very much for tuning in. Thank you for... So while we were testing, we jumped onto the wrong microphone and you heard me shouting at the dog to get out because he was trying to knock down all of our cables.
Yeah, unfortunately, Tank, our dog, doesn't have a lot of... interesting points to make about the novel we're going to talk about today.
No, he's more of a sci-fi fan than murder mystery, you know. So,
So speaking of the topic today we are talking about Agatha Christie's Murder on the Orient Express. Now, I don't know if you knew this, but I learned that Agatha Christie is the #1 best-selling author behind the Bible, so God, and Shakespeare, which is crazy. Well, he's the author of the Bible, right?
I think so. Americans think so, but I don't think he's God.
But you know, like in theory. So this is this is one of probably her most well-known novels, and featuring, oh gosh, I'm going to absolutely murder these names. My family live in France, and they can speak French absolutely just beautifully, and I
can't.
Yes. So the novel centers around the world's greatest detective, self-proclaimed, I believe, Hercule
Poirot.
Poirot. There we go.
Yeah, Hercule Poirot.
I'm going to refer to him as HP because I have chronic mush mouth.
So you can think of that as Harry Potter if you prefer. That's perfectly acceptable.
Oh, that would be an interesting spin, wouldn't it?
Well, they have a crossover, right?
Well, trains, you know, there's there's trains in both of the books.
So therefore, they're pretty much the same thing. I mean, Harry Potter, Hercule Poirot. Maybe they can swap positions and they can be like the Philosopher's Stone, but Hercule Poirot's on the bus, on the train.
You know what? I'm sorry.
This grown man.
If HP was in the Philosopher's Stone, that thing would have gotten found immediately because he is an amazing detective.
Yeah. Oh, that's true. That's true. Yeah.
Do you want to give a wee summary of the book?
Sure. So we chose Murder on the Orient Express because we want to do a variety of different genres and try different things. And personally, I had never actually read a murder mystery before. So we figured, why not do the #1, most well-known murder mystery of pretty much all time, alongside probably Sherlock stuff, but I'd probably call that more pure mystery. Mm-hmm. This is Murder on the Orient Express by Agatha Christie, and this is a novel, there's a murder, and it's on the Orient Express. That's a good summary of the book, really. By some mal-happened unintentional circumstances, Hercule Poirot, our main detective of the story, gets put on this train where he was originally not booked. On this very same day, he tries to get a carriage and finds that sadly every single carriage is booked.
I believe he was called to New York on urgent business.
London, yes.
London.
And so he tries to get a carriage and he can't, but thankfully he bumps into the owner of the company, the director of the company of the trains, and he gives him a carriage. He says, "Don't worry, we always have one spare," and then they manage to finagle it to make it work, and they manage to squeeze Poirot in.
Who, by the way, sorry, just a note here, beside Mr. Ratchet, I think is my least favorite character of the novel. The owner of the...
you don't like Mr. Book?
No, I do not. No. He has several very interesting ideas on Italians, and this novel was written in the 1930s, so I get it. So
this novel was written in 1934, or published in 1934, probably written in the preceding years, right? And during this time, Mussolini was in charge of Italy, right? So the view that people had on Italy was that of Mussolini. Now, I'm not going to say that it's fair to then therefore dub every Italian to be like Mussolini, because it's not fair to say that. However, we did see how the country then acted in World War II as well. So, there's. I'm not going to say that it's understandable because but I get where the author's coming from, but I don't necessarily agree. Right?
Yes, I guess you can. So, just to give you a little bit more illumination of what we're talking about here. So, as Ken was saying with the plot, there's HP is stuck on this train. He's stuck on the train with these I think there's about 8 characters, very interesting and diverse, of all different nationalities, all different social statuses, all on this train.
And this is pointed out at the very beginning of the novel.
It's actually, not to spoil anything, but at the end of the novel is actually one of the kind of
clues.
The clues, yes, the clues towards who done it. So they're on this train, and Mr. Ratchet, who immediately just rubs every single person wrong, he ends up murdered. And unlucky for HP is that the train gets stuck in the snowdrift, so they're going to be stuck there for days. And I remember one of my favorite, I think, little quotes was, here I was thinking I was going to be bored. So he has a murder mystery to keep him entertained while they're all stuck in this snowdrift.
I don't know why they don't ever look into Hercule Poirot as a potential suspect, because he's always around when murders happen. You know that?
That's
he's
true.
always there.
That's true.
I think there's a similar plotline in Sherlock. Actually, they tried to do the same sort of thing,
That's
right?
true. Yeah, they did. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. They get stuck in the snowdrift in the train, and they find this body, and then it's a whodunit scenario. And so Poirot immediately starts interviewing. I say immediately. There wasn't much urgency throughout the book. I mean, everything was kind of...
Well, they're stuck in a snowdrift.
Yeah,
they've got all the time in the world.
Yeah,
they've got at least a couple days.
Like, there was a couple times where you'd think they'd uncover a clue, and you would expect them to urgently chase down that clue, and then they decide to have tea and biscuits. And it's or they'd escort one of the ladies to her carriage. I'm like, you're solving a murder. Why?
Number one,
can't somebody else do that?
Manners. And number two, Bottleneck episode. Nobody's going there. So whoever did this murder is on the train with them.
So let's discuss some of the characters, because there's quite a lot of interesting characters that we are introduced to at this point. So there is Mr. McQueen? Yeah, one of those?
Yep, the secretary of Mr. Ratchet.
The secretary of Mr. Ratchet.
An American.
An American chap. There's also a lot of interesting observations by
Americans.
The characters.
I felt personally affronted. Lots of characters, several characters had several things to say about nationalities. It's a recurring theme, and I pointed out on my Goodreads account that this is a common theme that I found in Moby Dick as well. I don't know if this is... I don't know if authors feel like they appear to be more perceptive and interesting and of varied and world explored intellect, because they can point out, that trait is from this nationality. That's very common for them to do that. But it's more akin to astrology to me personally, because it's like they're making it up, really, isn't it? I mean, it's much more likely Italians to stab. What? Yeah, they're going on and on and on about the Italians. Like the head of the railroad company, HP's pal, the director, was just insistent that this must have either been done by a woman, because the amount of stabbing, so it must have been done by hysterical woman. Yes, exactly.
And a lot of them were feeble strikes, and therefore it must have been a woman.
Absolutely, must have been a woman. Yes, how our vaginas get in the way of the emotions
and stabbing.
And stabbing, yes, exactly. Yeah. So that was the first. Obviously, it has to be a woman, and then the director is insistent, despite whatever evidence HP uncovers, despite whatever pretty educated guesses he's making. No, it has to be the Italian. It has to be the Italian in second class. It is the Italian. And, well, he wasn't wrong, technically.
To an extent, and let's not spoil it just yet. There are spoilers in this review. Also, Graham316 in the chat says, the stereotypes do enhance the ending, though, and there is a level of that, right? It is intrinsic to the plot, and to be fair, it doesn't necessarily represent the author, although I suspect it does to some extent. It represents the characters, and there's nothing wrong with having a racist character in your book, right? That racists exist and they should be shown in books, right?
As long as it's not painted as something to be admired or glorified. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So, other characters, there's...
Mrs. Hubbard, who is this very annoying American mother who will not stop going on and on about her daughter.
My daughter!
Wow, that's an amazing American accent.
No. To be fair, I'm not trying to imitate Americans. I was trying to imitate the audiobook version, right?
Oh,
So I listened to the audiobook, whereas...
I read the actual book.
Yes.
And I have to say, well, we'll take a little tangent here and discuss our different
perspectives
ways of consuming this story. So for me, I love reading books. There's nothing that can quite...
Really? You like reading books?
I love reading books.
I wouldn't have thought on
My
this...
whole degree. Crazy.
I wouldn't have thought on this, literature-based show that you enjoyed reading books.
I love reading books.
Okay.
But I like reading physical books. I like being able to kind of like see and hold and touch and feel and have it kind of be every sense, it's a whole experience.
She likes to taste the pages.
Oh yeah. But when I was reading the book, I felt like I should have been on some 1920s Art Deco train and listening to the rattling and just, oh my God, the atmosphere was just so lush, and the characters, they leapt off the page for me. But how was your audiobook experience?
First of all, I agree with the atmosphere side of things. I felt that there wasn't, so the audiobook wasn't dramatized. I mean, the narrator was the guy who played Hercule Poirot. I can't remember his name, in the actual TV show, which is, world renowned and very, very popular show. And I remember from my childhood, my mother used to watch that show constantly. So, it probably linked in subconsciously to the voice of that guy for me, very nicely. But there was no actual, train noises or anything like that. It was just his interpretation of the various characters of different nationalities and genders and pitches and, tremors in the voice and nasally tones and such. He did a fantastic job, by the way, like a true actor. That was really impressive. I was thoroughly impressed. I do recommend the audiobook version. I felt that he also added an additional layer that wouldn't exist in the book, I assume. Which is, he would often do, if he thought the character should be surprised, he'd go, little simple,
little audible,
audible vocal expressions that aren't words, right? There's quite a lot of those throughout, including like if it says a character laughs and then speaks, he won't do the laugh, but he'll speak as if you had just finished laughing, right? Things like that really bring you into the story. But anyway, my point is that whenever he talked about whenever it was Mrs. Hudson that was speaking, she always Hubbard.
Mrs. Hubbard.
Okay, Mrs. Hubbard. She she always had that voice of my daughter, and it was shrill and irritating, and every time she said my daughter, you cringed a little bit, which is,
we all know one of those in our life, don't we?
Yeah. Someone who's so uninteresting that they can only talk about other people. Yes.
So what about the other characters? What would you say is your favorite suspect? Wait, who was your favorite suspect, and who, before you found out who it actually was, who was your number one suspect?
Yeah, those are different things. So who's my favorite character?
Yes, who's your favorite character? Of the suspects.
Okay, yeah, I was going to say I do enjoy Poirot.
He's great.
Yeah, I just like the fact that he does manage to change his character.
Oh, it's so elegant, and I love his mustache. You could just see him. Like, I think there was an allusion to mustache wax at some point. And I was like, yep. That's
definitely him.
You guys would have got along.
Yes, we would. So there's at the very start of the book, when he's in the hotel before getting on the train, he speaks about how he, when he's trying to book the carriage on the train, and they say, first or second class, Mr. Poirot, and he says, first, of course. Like, of course. He's just such an upper class gent.
So French.
He's Belgian.
Is he Belgian?
Yeah, he's Belgian. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I thought he was French. Oh my God, look at me.
He speaks French constantly, to be fair, so it's easy to think that he is French.
And it sounds like a French name, but who is your favorite suspect, and who was the one you thought was most likely? Who did you think it was?
I don't know if I have a favorite suspect, because I found them all interesting for different reasons. I didn't really have like a preference per se. But who did I think it was? At the very beginning, I did suspect the Mr. Blanc, the director of the company.
Oh, I didn't even think about him.
I thought it was odd that he invited Hercule Poirot onto the train and was so trying to get him on there. But then I thought maybe he's doing this because he wants to, if he wants to murder somebody, he wants to have Poirot on his side to be like, oh yes, it's definitely this person who killed that person, not Mr. Blanc. He's a good person, right? Yeah. So I thought that was maybe part of it. Also, so this is a slight spoiler to what we're going to talk about later. There's several clues that are found. One of the clues that's found is it seems that the suspect was wearing a spare set of clothes that was used by the
wagon light
concierge.
uniform.
Yes.
With the missing button. Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So that was an extra uniform, and it was worn by somebody who wasn't one of the main
conductors.
Conductors, yes, that's the word, not concierge. So I thought, who has access to these uniforms? That's obvious, the director, right? And they kept getting into places they weren't supposed to. It seemed like they were opening carriages here and there, going through the back of carriages somehow. I don't know how that works. And I thought, who else would know how to do that than the director? So I assumed that the director was at least involved, and I was entirely wrong. He was probably one of the few people who weren't involved.
Yeah, he was actually probably one of the most, racism aside, probably one of the most innocent characters.
Yeah.
So I would say for me, my favorite character was the princess, the Russian princess, who looked like a toad.
Looked like a frog, yes.
Yes, who's marvelously ugly, but I don't know.
She had a very eloquent...
felt like she had gravitas. She felt like she was a very...
sharp intellect as well.
Exactly, yes, very sharp intellect, but she felt like she was a very fleshed out character, and then you realize she was one of the first people to kind of have a motive, as she was the godmother to this murdered child who comes into play.
So, let's describe that, right?
I was going to say as well about who I thought my number one suspect.
I know. Please go on. Okay.
Thank you. Just I wanted to say, because I thought that this had to be it. I was so certain, and I was kind of right, but I was really surprised. I thought it was the Count and Countess. They just seemed very I don't know, or Mary Debenham. Mary Debenham also kind of rubbed me off the wrong way. It was either Mary Debenham and the Colonel.
Describe Mary to us. Who's she again?
She was the kind of the English lady that was palling around with the Colonel.
Ah, yes. Mm-hmm. She was suspicious.
Yeah.
So the motive for the murder is another thing that Poirot tries to work out, right? So he's asking all these questions that seem kind of irrelevant to all these people. And he tries to find out who the person who's murdered the victim actually was. Because it turned out he had a fake name. Mm-hmm. And they found out that he was actually a famous child murderer from the US.
And I don't know if you picked up on this. As a true crime absolute buff, like I love true crime. I am all about it. My dad was a police officer, and my bedtime stories were like Ted Bundy. There's a lot of issues here. But so for the true crime aspect, it was so cool to see the Lindenburg baby case, if you're familiar with it, kind of in this fictional setting. Now, Lindenburg baby case, I don't know if you're familiar. It was this very famous case, and I believe it was in the 1920s, where a very famous pilot and his wife, who was a starlet, I believe, they had a child who was kidnapped, and it was very much the same as in the story where the child was kidnapped and they asked for ransom, but it turned out that the child had been dead for days. There's some controversy there. If you are interested, if you're wanting to go down a rabbit hole sometime on the internet for true crime, I highly suggest looking into this. But so this Mr. Ratchet, who's really the Castanetti, was the leader of the gang who kidnapped the Daisy Armstrong. So that's the kind of the Lindenburgs of the novel. Mm-hmm. Kidnapped the kid, and it happened exactly like it did with the Lindenburg case. So we found out his real identity, and you see why someone would want to murder him. But who? Who was it?
So Poirot had a bit of an understanding of potential motive there, because who wouldn't want to kill a guy who killed a kid, right? Mm-hmm. And made a bunch of money off it as well. Additionally, this guy was charged and found guilty, but he got off on some kind of technicality, right? So everybody knew it was him, but then he just changed his name, got out of Dodge, he left the US and
hightailed it to Europe.
Hightailed to Europe with all the money that he made in the ransom. Mm-hmm. So, it's one of those things that's kind of understandable that could happen in real life, right? The criminal justice system is not perfect. And people do get, and especially if you know that the person definitely committed the crime, but the justice system can't prove it, and the justice system fails.
Vigilante justice.
There's a level of, it's a really interesting ethical discussion, actually. If the justice system has already failed to find them guilty, but they are you morally responsible to carry out the punishment?
Justice. Right?
Mm-hmm. Good question.
And this book definitely touches on that, I would say. The ending is definitely something that touches on that. But
So
as the kind of the story unfolds, you're finding all this evidence, and it's looking like it's two people, but then we're looking also for this small dark man with a womanish voice, and there's no one on board who fits that description. So there's a lot of red herrings mixed in amongst the actual evidence.
Additionally, when Poirot investigates the carriage where the murder took place, he finds multiple clues that point to multiple people on the train, which seems like half of the train walked through that carriage in the middle of the night.
Crazy that, right?
Yeah.
So just to let you guys know that there will be spoilers in this episode. So
we're now about to go into them. Yes,
we're about to go into them. So if you want to pause and go read very quickly, it's less than 300 pages. You can do it. It's awesome. Give it a try, and then come back and join us for the discussion on the spoilers.
The audiobook is 6 hours long, and it's well worth. You can listen to it. I listened to it comfortably at 1.25 times speed. So I got it done, 5 hours or something like that, and
we were like,
I got it done in half a day. So it was, and it's very well worth the read, and worth the credit as well.
So that ending. First off, though, can I just say how crazy it is that, solving crimes way back when, oh my gosh, there's no fingerprint.
Oh, they had that. They mentioned it.
Yeah, okay, he had the dust and stuff, but there's no,
there's
blood analysis. There's no, black lights or anything like that.
No cameras.
You have to wonder how many crimes must people have just gotten away with scot-free because there's no HP around to solve it.
Harry Potter's not there, guys.
He's not there either.
Yeah, he's not there to, Expelliarmus.
Yeah, there you go. I didn't know a spell. Of course you knew one.
So, in the lead up to the ending, it's quite interesting because, I don't know about you, but I started thinking this is just getting ridiculous. I started getting a little annoyed with the book. I thought, okay, so this person, I can't remember who interviews first and who he finds out is first related. I think it's the countess.
The princess.
Oh, it's the princess.
Yeah.
So he first finds out the princess has this relation has a motive due to the fact that she's related.
Godmother. She was godmother to Daisy Armstrong, the child that got kidnapped.
Which is a very good reason to have a motive to kill the guy who did it, right?
But she was very frail and weak, and there's no way
she couldn't have done it.
She could have done it. Maybe the feeble stabs, but definitely not the strong stabs.
Certainly not. So, then we find out, I can't recall the order and whatever, but we find out multiple more people were also related to the family in some ways. One was a chauffeur, one was a cleaner, one was a gardener, the cook, the maid.
Governess.
Yeah, it's like, wait a minute, half this carriage had something to do with this family.
All of the carriage has something to do with the family.
Yeah.
And we find out in the end.
And then you think to yourself, wait a minute, this makes absolutely no sense because, probability speaking, even in the 1930s, there's a lot of people on Earth. It's still millions, right? It's not today's level, but it was still in the millions. So the chances of all these people who are supposed to be just in America are now on this train in Europe without organizing it, that is very unlikely.
Quite a coincidence, I would think. Too much of a coincidence to be a coincidence, actually.
Yes. An impossibility becomes a possibility.
So what we're driving at is that everybody was in on it. Every single character did a stab-in or something. Everybody came to that train with the express purpose of making sure that Cassanetti paid for his crimes.
Yes.
And when HP finds out about this, I think he does a very elegant and moral thing.
I thought it was really interesting because I suspected that Poirot would be more interested in... sorry, one moment.
Sorry. One of our little bookworms has escaped the library and is trying to weasel his way in here.
We have about 5 cables trailing all over the place, and our camera is sitting haphazardly on a stool on a desk with 3 different lamps around it. If they walk through here, everything's going to fall over, so we need to be very careful.
Hit us up on Twitter or Instagram if you want pictures of our setup.
Yeah, we'll do that afterwards. Yeah. It's kind of funny. Anyway, so we find out that all these people are involved. We think it's crazy. It doesn't make sense in the lead up. And then we find out that, in fact, they did all partake in the murder. And they actually, literally, as I said earlier, all seemed to walk through that one carriage to stab the guy over and over. They did. They literally did that. Yep. So there's 2 carriages that are mentioned. One is first class, one is second. Poirot was originally in the second class carriage, and the first class carriage was supposed to be entirely fully booked by all the people who want to murder the other guy on that carriage, right? But they couldn't get this one specific
cabin number 15. No, cabin number 16. 16.
They couldn't get number 16 nor number 1 because number 1 was the director, which I don't know if that's separate or whatever. The number 16, it turns out the director kept in his back pocket for special guests.
Like Poirot.
Like Poirot. So, that kind of put a foil in their plan, and the fact they hit a snowdrift so that they could no longer... A big part of their plan was that they were going to pretend that, they made this suspect up of the feminine guy who's, very dark and small
with the woman voice.
Yes, they were planning
Assassin.
they were planning on the murder not being found until after the next stop. So in other words, they wanted to pretend that they got off at that point.
Exactly, give the pretense that this assassin jumped on, did a quick little stab, and then got off again.
But they haven't reached that stop yet, and the murder has been found. So that meant that they had to suddenly drastically change their plans, and that's how Poirot found the set of clues, and they couldn't prepare properly for that circumstance. So it does turn out that pretty much everybody was involved.
They did do a very good job, though, on the fly, with the whole conspiracy.
I would have felt for it.
Absolutely. It was very convincing, and it was very well thought out, and one of the biggest twists for me, however, was Mrs. Hubbard, as we've already mentioned, who's this annoying American nasally mother, is actually the mother of Daisy Armstrong, and was the famous actress. And
yes, not the godmother.
Yes. Pardon? Wait, not the godmother?
Oh, the godmother was the princess.
The princess was the godmother.
Right,
sorry. Sorry.
I confused myself there.
Yes, absolutely. That's completely wrong point. Yes.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so there was a godmother and a mother.
No, Mrs. Hubbard was the mother of Daisy Armstrong, and that was a big shock for me. I did not expect that, to be completely honest.
So the woman who was irritatingly shouting, "My daughter!" throughout the whole book, turns out she's the one who actually lost her daughter. Yeah. So, lots of people who have clear... And they all loved this girl who got kidnapped. They were all severe... And also, other people in the family killed themselves from suicide afterwards. So there was lots of...
It was the nursemaid who the police put a lot of pressure on because they thought it was her. And that was the colonel's his love interest, and she committed suicide. So that was his axe to grind.
Yes. So, this whole carriage was full of people who killed the guy. They all killed him. And at the end of the entire book, Poirot was presented with this ethical dilemma. What does he do? And he's literally asked by Mr. Book, what should we do? And Poirot says, well, Mr. Book, what do you think? You're the director of the company. I'm technically here on your time. What do you think we should do? Because Poirot put forward two potential solutions to this mystery. The first one was what they wanted him to think. So he followed the false line of clues and explained that as the first potential mystery solution. And then he described the second one, which was the actual one. So everybody knew that the game was up then, because he explained fully what happened and how every single person was involved and how they're all related, and he pointed it all out. So they knew that they were screwed at that point. So he asked Mr. Buck, what do you think? Is it number 1 or number 2?
And he went with number 1. So justice has been done. They all agreed that it would be an unnamed assassin who carried out this murder, and everyone else would be able to go on with their lives realizing that they had rid the world of an evil man. Yep.
And the good thing was they had a doctor on board who said he was happy to confirm number 1. And they also had Poirot, of course, the detective, who pointed out all the evidence and had this all done up for the police, so that's all sorted. Mm-hmm. And all these witnesses who would corroborate as well. So that's that. And that was the end of the book. Yeah, that was the end of the book. Yeah. So with that, shell shock of an ending where you have this sort of lead up to, this makes no sense, this is ridiculous, why are all these people involved and related to that family, that's not possible, this is just a bunch of stupid circumstances.
Yeah.
How did you feel about that?
Well, I feel like this is a really groundbreaking novel. Unfortunately, I feel like I've read it a little bit late in the game, so this kind of trick has been played on me before. So when it did happen, it didn't have the kind of impact I'm sure it would have made in the 1930s with its original audience. So I have to say that separate, it was awesome. It was really, really well done.
This just in, 86 years is a little bit too late to have been the first people to read the book.
A little late to the game.
I feel like it was a hell of a twist for me. I did not expect it at all. I don't read as much true crime stuff as Ken Features does, so I had no way of having this as a what do they call it when something's done the same idea done again and again, and a trope. I didn't feel like it was a trope for me because I hadn't experienced it. So I was just mostly super impressed by the author's ability to have all these different plot lines and consider it. And this made me wonder often about the design of the book. I mean, did Agatha Christie sit down and map out from the end to the start, or from the start to the end, or a little bit of both?
Well, apparently, and I think this is actually one of her writing tips, is that if you're writing a murder mystery, which I actually am, I'm writing a murder mystery for my family at Christmas. We're going to do a murder mystery party, and I'm writing, so this was actually very helpful, is you start with the murder and then you work your way back.
That's
you start
sensible.
with the crime and you work your way back.
Yeah.
Now, Agatha Christie, also, if you guys are ever bored, you should look into her when she disappeared. She, master of mystery, she disappeared and was able to fool people for ages.
It's no surprise.
In real life, so.
It's
very,
not
very
hard,
interesting.
though, is it?
I think she was upset at her husband and she was like, I'm going to make you suffer by me disappearing and you're not going to know.
Please don't do that to me. That's not cool. So yeah, in Legend Tinker in the chat says, Beck says, the plot reminds me of an episode of CSI with a murder on an airplane. Oh yeah, so that's exactly what we're saying, right? It's
Bottleneck episode.
It's such a good design for an interesting plot line that it will get used again and again.
Mm-hmm.
Even unintentionally, it'll be in the back of your mind when you're writing.
Absolutely. But that's the thing about good ideas. I mean, take a good idea and put a spin on it, make it your own.
There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, otherwise we wouldn't have genres, right?
Exactly.
We'd have to create a new genre every time you came up with something, and that'd be madness. It's all about refining ideas. So before we get to the end here, can you give me a rating? What did you think?
Oh, well, it's a classic. Not exactly my cup of tea. I like my true crime to be a little bit more. Yes, this is my cup of tea. Chai tea, very good. I like my murder to be a bit more serial killer. Do love me a good.
You like more death and murder.
More death and gore, please.
All right.
But as for, I felt it was elegant. It was intelligent. The characters were so lifelike for me. Racism aside, probably a 7 out of 10.
Okay. Like I said, I feel like the racism is one, it's an old book. It's it's part of its time.
It's almost quaint to read it, isn't it?
It is a bit. You sort of like
oh,
that's lovely. Yeah.
Oh, look at those crazy kids back in the 20s.
Yeah, it's also the sort of like mindset of the upper class. They don't necessarily see these things as much, right? And this is a very upper class written story. Mm-hmm. Everybody involved is upper class, right? Even the colonel back then is seen as like a
Well, there were some maids and stuff like that, but they didn't get nearly as much stage time as like princess and countess.
They were involved with the upper class, though, right? It's all relevant to the upper class.
That's true.
So I think it's a product of its time. I think it's representative of its time, and I think that it's also representing, the characters, not necessarily the author, and I don't have a problem with that.
But what's your rating?
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's my caveat, pre-rating, right? So I wouldn't say the racism bothered me that much because I didn't feel it was... from the author. I don't think it was trying to sell racism. It wasn't like, hoorah, racism. I think it was more like, there happened to be characters who are a bit racist. I'm not okay with racism, though. So my rating for the book, I gave it 5 stars out of 5 on Goodreads, because it doesn't have a more, niche system for rating it. I'd say the actual narration of the book was absolutely fantastic. I'd give that 10 out of 10. That was probably one of my favorite parts, was the narration. The plot line was amazing, so I was super impressed by that. The writing style was really interesting. At first, I was a little irritated by the occasional French word, because I don't speak a lick of French, so I just felt lost whenever that happened. But then they started to make it more obvious, and I don't know, it was very contextualized, so I started to pick up what Poirot meant when he would say something. And it was actually made me feel kind of smart, because I started to understand a little bit of French. So it was well written in that regard.
Très bien.
Yes, exactly. I'm not going to try and say anything. I could do German, but that's about it. So yeah, I give it 5 stars, and I think that if I had to do it on a 10-point scale or a 100-point scale, I'd maybe give it like 96.
Wow.
Again, not necessarily my genre. I'm not going to go read a bunch of these. I'm not going to go read all of Poirot books, because I think there's 67 stories with Poirot in it, and the TV show on top.
I think this is the most well-known one.
Yes.
Though. Yeah.
And I might read them more in the future, but I'm not jumping out of my way to do it.
But chat, if you've read any of these, let us know. If you've read anything other than the Murder on the Orient Express, let us know which other ones you enjoyed. I'd really be interested to see that, actually.
Absolutely, yeah. Next week, we're going to be reading The Halloween Tree.
I am so excited. Let me say it. We're reading Ray Bradbury's Halloween Tree. And I'm not a big fan of Ray Bradbury myself, but this story shook me to my very core as a child, as well as the very terrifyingly animated movie. So, very excited about this. Probably one of my favorite books, because it's my favorite holiday. So... Yay.
So we actually have an Audible affiliate link that we should probably start sharing, because why not, right? But we'll check our Instagram, right? We'll do that soon. If you're interested in following on what we're reading and taking part, check out your local library. It's free, and you can get free stuff. You can also get free audiobooks from a lot of libraries. They're very up to date and modern. You can get apps that give you free audiobooks from your local library.
Yes.
Check it out. I mean, why not do it for free, right? Okay, second, if you want to actually own a digital copy, I would recommend Audible. It is a good service for that reason. However, it's Amazon, so, ethics, think about that as well. We can give an affiliate link, and it'll give us a little bit under the table as well, which we appreciate. Alternatively, you can always purchase the book somewhere like Amazon or whatever as well.
Library first, though. We got to
Yes.
support these public services. They're
For sure.
just, really important. The backbone of our society.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And you know what? The libraries get government grants based on how much usage they have. So go check out your local library.
Mm-hmm.
That's US and UK, by the way. Okay, yeah. So it's a Halloween Tree by
Ray Bradbury.
We've both read Fahrenheit 451.
I think it's that, yeah.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
We've both read it before, and we recognize it as being beautifully written, but not our. I didn't like.
Not my cup of tea.
I didn't enjoy
No,
it.
He's too nihilistic for me. But Halloween Tree, it is perfect. It is I'm sorry. I'm already getting excited about it.
We'll save it for next week, though.
It's a great metaphor for death. Okay.
It's very appropriate for Halloween. So we'll be here next week. We'll be dressed up a little bit. Nothing crazy. We'll be wearing our costumes.
Well, I might go crazy.
We'll bring out our
see.
pumpkins, and be sure to tune in for that. Like us on Instagram, share us on Twitter, all these different things. We very much appreciate it. You can check us out on Instagram.com/VTW Show X, or just search for VTW Show X on Instagram. You can check us on Twitter.com/VTW Show X, and you can also check out myself on Twitter.com/DrKenreid.
Are you okay? Do you need a breath? My lord, that was very impressive.
Oh, that's only like a quarter of what I do for the other show. You can also support us on Patreon.com/Show X, a minimum of $1 per month. And we very much appreciate every penny. You can also email on the show, vtwshox@gmail.com. Check us out on Reddit, reddit.com/r/Show X. Be sure to post there for any post-show discussion. You can also do it on Instagram if you so please, but Reddit's really a more appropriate place, isn't it? You've been listening to the novel Tea Book Nook, hosted by Show X here on Twitch. Thank you so much. We really appreciate your time. We love you guys. And we'll see you next week. Bye.
Thank you guys. Thank you so much for being here. We'll see you next week.